Zapraszamy do wysłuchania podcastu Diany Dąbrowskiej Kieślowski 2.0, czyli Nauka o filmie poprzez twórczość Krzysztofa Kieślowskiego. Zrealizowano w ramach stypendium Ministra Kultury, Dziedzictwa Narodowego i Sportu.
Kieślowski 2.0, Kieślowski 2.0. My name is Diana Dąbrowska and I'm really happy to invite you to our 9th episode of the podcast series Kieślowski 2.0 and our second episode in English. Please meet our special guest. His name is Peter Jansson. Peter is a psychoanalyst, philosopher and writer. His intellectual work is at the intersection of many fields as psychoanalysis, culture, art, film, literature and philosophy. He has participated in many anthologies in this field. Now, and this is very important from the perspective of our podcast, he is in the final stages of work on a larger book about Kieślowski, and he gave many lectures and wrote many articles about the Polish filmmaker. He also wrote a book about the Swedish writer and poet Karin Boye. Currently, apart from Kieślowski, he's working on an English anthology containing a psychoanalytical look at the Swedish director Ingmar Bergman. In the future, Peter plans to write a book about the Italian painter Caravaggio. In this episode, you will learn a lot, but among other things, you will learn about what connects, according to Peter Jansson, Krzysztof Kieślowski, with such filmmakers as Bo Widerberg, the director of Barnvagnen, Swedish Scene from 1963, and of course, Ingmar Bergman. We'll be talking especially about the movie Själens from 1963. Peter will also tell us more about his favorite films from Kieślowski in the fiction field and also documentary. As well, he will tell us more about his favorite episodes, parts of the Decalogue series, especially Decalogue number 1 and Decalogue number 5, as we know also in the longer version as short film about killing, krótki film o zabijaniu. You will discover from Peter an truly original reflection about prop, scenography, color in Kieślowski's film and all kind of doubles, especially from the philosophical perspective that Peter represent amongst many others. We would like to thank from the bottom of our hearts not only Peter Jansson for his time. He's truly an amazing writer, philosopher, and a person, such a sweet person in general. And apart from, of course, Peter, we would like to thank the Polish Institute in Stockholm, Polski Instytut w Sztokholmie, Polska Instytutet Stockholm, for all the help in creating this episode, establishing the contact with Peter Jansson, and all the kind support. In particular, we would like to thank Mr. Michał Piotrowski, who was in direct contact with us through all the process. Thank you, and I really hope you will enjoy this episode, and please listen to the Kieślowski 2.0 series. Please, Peter, tell me, about your personal approach to Kieślowski's work, and also when this love for Kieślowski started. Which films, which titles were the most important for you while, I don't know, maybe growing up? Could you tell me more about this connection that you have with our Polish master of cinema?
Actually, it was a close friend of mine. Yes, his name was Jim Wahlgren. And he opened the door to Kieślowski's world for me. And it was a connection with the Gothenburg Film Festival. And it was in the late 1990. They have, they were retrospectively showing the Decalogue films. Mm-hmm. And in the coming years, we repeatedly watched the Three Colors trilogy, Trois Couleurs, The Double Life of Véronique, La Double Vie de Véronique, and the Decalogue, of course. And we also saw a wonderful documentary, I'm So. Have you seen it?
Yes, of course. It's
Uh,
even on DVD. It was released on DVD, and I remember it was a big discovery to also hear from Kieślowski about his work.
Yes. So it was 1995, and you know, it was his three closest collaborators after he himself stopped filming. Actually, it was Danish television, I think, that made the document. So I have, if I have time, I have a very strong personal memory connecting to Kieślowski. You know, in February 2006. 10 years after Kieślowski's death, I myself traveled to Warsaw to visit his grave. Mm-hmm. And it was snowing profusely, and this large and beautiful Catholic cemetery, sometimes Powązkowski, I think it's...
Yes.
Was nestled in a thick blanket of snow, you know, it was snowing. And this was in February 2006, but the guidebook had given the wrong address, and I couldn't find the tombstone. So I was walking and walking. I asked a large number of people, but no one knew where Kieślowski was buried. I think they didn't understand it because my English and their English, you know, and everything. But only after many kilometers and several hours of searching in the cold, in the snowing winds, when I had given up hope and would pass the exit, I met a university student, and she helped me to his grave. And, you know, it's located in a prestigious part of the cemetery. And the tombstone, it's a very beautiful tombstone.
With this.
Yes. And, yes, it's a bronze sculpture, you know, and with the thumb, as you show, forefinger of two hands. And this sculpture, Bednarski, I think his name is.
Yes.
So only after I had scraped away snow and ice did Kieślowski's name and date of birth and death appear. And at the same moment, and this is true, you know, the snowstorm disappeared. All the snow disappeared and the sun broke out, you know. So the fleeing snow crystals sparkled in the light, and the snow-covered cemetery, it was bathed now in sunshine and heat. So for a moment, it was like I was in a scene in Kieślowski's own movie, you know. It was a very special thing.
Amazing.
And so it's confirm and give body to his cinematic experience of this, you know, mystical coincidences beyond image and word we can meet in Kieślowski. And I saw it myself when I was in the cemetery. It was a very special meeting. So you can say, after I saw Kieślowski's film for the first time, I think I lost myself in the most sublime and tragic of worlds. It was populated by unforgettable stories, you know, images, voices, and moods. And in the coming years, the idea was born to write a book about this filmmaker. But the tragedy, of course, Kieślowski's death, but this tragedy is doubled because Jim Wahlgren, my friend, at the same age as Kieślowski, 54 years old, he also died in a heart attack in April 2013 as a result of he has a heart attack exactly like Kieślowski. So I can only hope that he would have recognized, because we had a lot of conversation about Kieślowski, me and my friend. So I hope that he will remember this if he see the books somewhere else. I don't know. But so the result is a work that actually I'm in the end of this work now. And this work is a fruit and concrete response to years of efforts and tries to draw a silhouette, you know, of one of the most desperate spiritual adventures that has taken place in the fences and gardens of the West, I think. And so in the book, I will take the reader of a journey through post-war Europe, and I will actually, I will try to show a man that gave body and form to the existence of nameless people and unknown life stories during the continent's horrific, 20th century history. So your questions, the first questions you asked, that is very important, I think. So what happened when I first met Kieślowski? I remember the movies put me in the same euphoric state of happiness as in childhood. I remember that. It was to be a child again, where time stopped, and it was like the film medium were completely new. When I saw Kieślowski, I experienced a deep sense of freedom in his films for the first time. And of course, like so many other people, I fell in love with Kieślowski in some way. I'm embraced by Kieślowski, but this tragic embrace, a melancholy I can feel in his film, a passion, a mystery is created, and a realization that our world is some way sinking also at the same time. But in this darkness, also the dream of a true community and a hope and a reconciliation, like you can feel that in this film. That was my first meeting with Kieślowski. And in a more intellectual way, you can say, for the first time, I met a filmmaker that evoked notions of future destinies of the world. Of course, the problems of life and death at a time when these existential issues and challenges are increasingly being denied and forgotten, you can say, in our world. So in fact, Kieślowski's filmmaking, I use his filmmaking and his film for a creative and meaningful instrument for a diagnosis of our society, I think. So, because there is a very special thing with Kieślowski's film, I think, and this is the following. This is an existential truth. In its very mystery way, Kieślowski frees himself from a concrete political, social, and historical reality and depicts a timeless, universal, existential human reality. So all people, regardless of ages, social and cultural context, can be united. I know people that are very young now here in Sweden now, and when they look at the Decalogue, they can recognize everything. But it is in the 80s, so it's fantastic, But I think it's because there are these existential, timeless questions that he is putting in the film that we can identify and identify with. So, as you can hear there, Diana, I like to present another perspective of Kieślowski, not the ordinary one that we interpret his films, but the opposite way. What can Kieślowski says about the world with his films and his filmmaking? I think Kieślowski is, you can say, he is a extremely sensitive philosopher of existence. He is a psychoanalyst in some way because he has an incredible feeling for people's destiny and existential conditions. So I would like, in my book, I would try what kind of image does Kieślowski's film evoke about Europe and the West, politics, society, culture, our bodies, spirituality, desire, doubt, despair, all these kinds of things. What can Kieślowski says about that through his films? And that's my work in some way. And as you remember, Kieślowski says himself, and this is a very important meaning, in the interview with Danusia Stock, he says, all my films from the first to the very last are about individuals who are a little lost, who don't really know how to live, don't really know what is right and wrong, and therefore desperately hope that something will happen. That Kieślowski for me, I think. So.
Wow, it's really, it's profound, and also I can't wait for your book. And I hope it will be translated also in Polish or in English. And I was thinking, you said a very interesting thing about this timeless aspect of Kieślowski's work.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you felt the same when you were watching the Polish movies. For example, Przypadek is with Bogusław Linda as Witold Długosz. It's a movie that was forbidden in the 80s. It was made
Yes.
in
You
1981.
mean Blind Chance? Blind Chance.
Yes. So I was thinking that, you know, there's these three versions of one man's life, which is universal, and one could say it's almost like in a video game. You know, you are lost, you try again, you get up and stuff. But also, I was wondering, what about these really polished subjects? You know, Blind Chance, one movie, and I guess the other is No End.
Yes. And Bez końca. Yes. What do you say in Polish? Bez końca?
No, bez końca. You really...
Okay, yes. You know, actually, I love these two movies, especially Blind Chance. And you're totally right. It's the same feeling of these existential conditions. I can see that truth in both these two films. And I think one thing is very important, and we will talk about that later maybe, but you cannot understand the international film productions, for instance, the trilogy or La W de Véronique, The Double Life of Veronique. You cannot understand these films if you don't see the Polish film, or especially the documentaries. I think you must see them. Otherwise, I think you can say in some way, you cannot understand these movies fully if you don't have seen the documentaries or the later Polish movies like Blind Chance, No End, because they, in some way, they are in these movies also. You have the concrete reality, you have this heaviness, you know, and the darkness, and these films wouldn't have lacked and the light, you know, and the sublime, metaphysical, and enigmatic character if you don't have this film from Poland in them, you know. And I think that's a very important. And I think it's very sad here in Sweden. We will talk about that later. But I can already now say, because the most people here in Sweden, they only see the foreign productions, you know, but they haven't seen the Polish film or the early documentary. And in some way, something is missing when you don't have seen them. I think that's...
I must say, I'm really surprised in a very good way, because normally there's this tendency outside of Poland to divide his filmography, you know, to say it was the Polish documentaries, Polish early fiction films, and then there's this episode with France, with international audience, and basta, no? And this is nice to see, like, that there is a continuation of some of the thematics.
Absolutely. I think this is a very important one, because, for instance, let's talk about the documentaries. Kieślowski's way of making movie is always documentary in some way. You have always that. Of course, he told us in some interviews that he left the documentaries, but the way of filming is always documentary. You have this very strong reality in the films, and that is always there. It's in the film trilogy, you have that, and in the Double Life of Veronique. And I think it's very important. Otherwise, you cannot. I think otherwise they had been empty. This film, there had been some kind of emptiness if you haven't have that Polish, this heaviness in the film. I think I call it a deficit. You know, you have a lack. You know, from Poland, the melancholy, you must have it in the film. That's.
And tell me, Peter, do you have like a favorite? I mean, maybe it's hard to just pick one or two, but in this journey with Kieślowski cinema, do you have your favorite picks, you know, from the documentary field and from the fiction field? Can you name, you know, some of them that you would like to be more shown or known in your country, for example, and you feel that there is lack of the picture of this one?
Yes. Myself, I have some documentaries that I like very much. The First Love, I like that very, very much. It's very special film for me. And I like The City of Woods. I like that. I like these two documentaries. They are very strong. When he interviews soldiers that are blind, you know, oh, it's incredible, you know. And also the patient that has tuberculosis, like himself and his father had. I like them. So that's some of the documentaries that I really appreciate very much. And then you have the early Polish film, like I have to, excuse me, I have to have the English, 1 second. So, yes, of course, I like The Hospital also, the documentary hospital. It's incredible. Yes, The Calm, I like The Calm. What do you call it? Spokoj, yeah. And
favorite actors, Jerzy Sztur.
yes.
To be honest, first role, because in 1976 there were two movies. There was Scarf, Blizna, and also Spokój, Calmness, Calm. I don't. And then this one was released in 1980. So
exactly.
even after The Amateur, which is like it's an early film of Kieślowski, and for television, for the television.
And if we talk about Jerzy Sztur, we can talk about Amateur, Kammerbuch. It's a very nice movie. And then of course one of my favorite, maybe the favorite, is Blind Chance. Of course, I like that movie very, very much because it has so different kind of levels in that movie. And then we will talk about the Decalogue, and there are some films in the Decalogue, especially the first one and the number 5. And then you have the foreign movies, of course, all of them, you know, especially the red film and the blue film. So.
Yes, so trying to get there, tell me, because I'm very, like, through this project that I'm doing, I'm really curious about this connection between Kieślowski and various countries, for example, not just France, but Italy. And I'm doing some research in that field, also discovering that the main producer of Le Double de Véronique was an Italian, or that, Nanni Moretti was meant to be like the actor that would be this puppet master player. Yes. So, but I'm very curious, how is the situation, Kieślowski and Sweden? One thing that we know for sure from the Polish perspective is that Kieślowski loved two Sweden authors. One, of course, is Ingmar Bergman, and the second one, and also it's very important to underline that he, even in his top 10 movies of all time, he put that title is Barnvagnen. I'm sorry for my Swedish.
That's a very good pronunciation. Yes.
From 1963, and it's really like, if you see this top 10 of Kieślowski, you can find La Strada, a Polish movie from Karabasz, his master in the documentary field.
Exactly.
And also this one, and thanks, I watched it 2 days ago to be prepared to our conversation, and I was really surprised because it's more of a nouvelle vague style of filmmaking, and there's one scene with a lamp that you can connect to the blue color of the trilogy.
Exactly.
The lamp.
Yes.
It's amazing. And
yes.
Could you tell me more about this connection with Bo Winderberg and also with?
Absolutely. Yes, I have prepared. This is very interesting because, as you say, there are strong connections between Bo Widerberg's Barnvagnen, the Prem, we can say, or some English title had given it Swedish Sin, so, in some way. But I think I must say something about Bo Widerberg first, so you have a background, as you can say. He was a Swedish film director. He was also a writer, editor, and an actor. And he was born in 1930, 8th of June 1930, and he died it was very tragic, he died in cancer, stomach cancer, 1st May 1997. And he did some very, very important movies that gave him also some international awards, really. He's a huge director in Sweden. For instance, Raven's End, Elvira Madigan, Joe Hill, The Man on the Roof, Victoria, The Man of Majorca. The Serpent's Way, I think, is very important, and All Things Fair. And this is interesting. He had 4 children. And Nina, Martin, Johan, and Matilda. And Johan, he was to become an actor. And his son Martin became a director. And as a child, Nina acted in 5 of her father's films. So it's fantastic, you know. And so his family, they were in the film. So what can we say about Widerberg's style as a director? As you said there, Diana, he was very preoccupied by new French way in some way. You can see he's a very natural light in his films. Often he had an handheld camera work. He favored casting amateurs, and you can see he loved Casadet, you know. So that's why he used amateurs and non-professionals opposed to real actors, like in this film Barnvagnen, as we will talk about. You also have this romantic and lyrical view of life and love in his films, especially in this film. And he relied heavily on improvisation and rarely wrote completed scripts in some way like Kieślowski. So he would shoot copious amounts of films, lot of films. And like Kieślowski, the most important thing was to cut, you know, afterward. So, but that was so the actors could be relaxed, you know, because they had a lot of film, you know, and appear more genuine in the front of the camera. And you also, like in this film, you also have frequent use of classical music and references to impressionist paintings in his films also. And often the films depict the working class and their struggles. So that to say something about his films. But there is one very important thing that everyone should know about Bo Widerberg. You know, before he began to make films, he was a writer, and he was very critical about the Swedish film at that time, in the beginning of 60s. He was, he loved, of course, Ingmar Bergman, but he was very critical about Ingmar Bergman also because the dominance, you know, in Sweden, and they didn't have the connection with reality that he saw in the international movies, like in the New French Wave or in Casadet's film. And with Barnvagnen, it is his first film, you know, 63. That was his first film that Kieślowski loved, you know. That's very interesting. So he did that film because he saw that the Swedish film tradition had lost the connection with the reality. And that's the reason. So you can say about this film that several of the participants were beginners in the film. And you remember the woman, Britt, in the film. Her name is Inge Taube. And she was totally inexperienced as an actress. Never shooting any film before like that. And, you know, the photographer was Jan Troell, and he is an incredible, huge photographer. I love his photo, you know, and you can see that in the film. And it was the first time for him also to make a feature film, you know. And Tommy Berggren, he's playing the guy named Björn in the film. And Tommy Berggren, he is a huge actor in Sweden. He has been, you know, one of Bergman's favorite actors, and he's. I think you can already see in this movie that he has something special, you know. But the making of the film was, as everyone said, it was chaotic, the making of the film. And it is the beginning of everything that became Widerberg's film universe. And it was really something new that Widerberg gave to Swedish film with this movie. I think that you will agree with me that Britt, Inge Taube, and Björn, they are fantastic. They are brilliant, I think, in their directing. And as a tentative young people who in everyday life seek their place in life. And you have these fantastic scenes that enhanced Truell's photo. So the critics were very positive. Some critics, they say that he was a little bit too tentative in the film, and he was uneven. But this new style, this was a new style for Swedish film, this Bergman. So, Diana, do you want me to say something about the film if one should see it? Again, in some minutes?
I was thinking, about this because he had two movies in 1963, and the other one, Raven. Now I will find the is even more famous. But I was thinking, why this one? I know it's like the first feature from this director, and I was thinking like maybe why Kieślowski like this one. If you have an idea.
Yes. I don't think Kieślowski liked Raven's End so much. I don't think that. But Barnvagnen, the Prem, he liked that. And I have some ideas of that. You have this strong connection with reality. You have that in Raven's End also. But it's the atmosphere in the film. The photo and this romantic and lyrical view of depicting life and love. But especially, I think, it is the freedom in the film. And you can feel these coincidences that we meet in Kieślowski's film also. You have this, people meet each other in some way, And I think Kieślowski loved that in the movie. And you have young people searching to find an identity. They are in some way lost, uncertain. And in Kieślowski's early movies, you can find these people. For instance, in Concert of Request, Concert System, you have this. You can feel that. It's the same like Barnvagnen. And in the documentary that I took, First Love, you have this couple, they tried to make, and she became pregnant like she does in this film, So I have some scenes in the film that correspond to Kieślowski. I have 7 scenes. 7 scenes. First, number 1, we have sights from the city, Malmö. That's the 3rd biggest city in Sweden. It's the south of Sweden where all the film is shooted. And that reminds, I think, about some of the streets and facades in the Decalogue, You don't know if it's Malmö. It's the same when you're in the Decalogue. You don't know that it's a very special area in Warsaw. You have there is some connection there. Scene 2, when Britt and Björn meets in the shop where she now works and, as a shop assistant. It's like Lena and Michal in Kieślowski Podziemny pedestrian subway. They meet in the shop. You remember? It's the same feeling there. And that is a very tragic story in the pedestrian subway because they met with failure. But you have the failure here also. So that's a correspondence, I think. And, Lena is working in a shop in the pedestrian subway in Warsaw. And another scene, number 3, is the scene with pigeons. There is a lot of pigeons in the film. And Brid's younger brother, he's looking at them at the facades of the house, which correspond to Pavel in the first Decalogue film. You remember the first opening scenes when he opened the windows and he's seeing the pigeons. It's exactly like in this movie. It's very, very interesting. And you also, if you remember that, and there's another scene from the factory when Britt is working with the other women, and it's recalled the opening scenes from the documentary from the City of Woods. You know, they're working there. So I think, because this is 1963, and the other films of Kieślowski, they come after, you know. And there is also, if you remember, a very romantic scene when Britt and Björn are in a record store. It's a very nice scene. And they have headphones, and they are listening to Vivaldi. And that reminds me of a scene when Valentine in the Red film, she's listening in a record store in Geneva, and she listening to music by the fictional Dutch composer van der Boedenmeijer. But the scenes, there are some correspondence, the same atmosphere. And 6, as you say, when she brings this lamp, the chandelier, from her parents' apartment and put it in the roof in her own apartment. And when she touches the crystals, it's like when Julie in the blue film is touching. It's exactly the same way of touching the glass. And number 7, later scene. It is when Britt are walking in the street in Malmö. It's a little bit late in the film, and she's dazzled by these sun reflections from the windows, because there are some younger boys, they are sitting doing sun cats, you call them. And it's exactly the same way when Veronique in The Double Life of him, when she's in her apartment and a younger boy is playing with his sun cats. It's the same thing, you know, where you can see. So there are something.
Wow, I need to see it again with all these, you know, scenes comparison. But you should do like a video essay about it and compare, you know, the scene, because while you were, I was seeing this, and it's a maybe funny thing to say, but these light cats, as you use this expression in Polish, is like to put rabbits of light. So you just.
Yeah.
As a
rabbits, yeah, okay.
You're really amazing. I mean, because I was thinking of maybe, you know, some scenes, you know, that also we have like a girl from this lower side of this economical aspect of the city. She's
exactly.
Yeah, and this is like from first movie, that even her future is uncertain. You know, if we compare with this economical factor that were important for Kieślowski in the beginning of his work. Then we have, of course, these French characters that but also in the Decalogue, that like we are outside of some political and also economical factors. But there was a moment when it was really important. And as in Spokój, says, I mean, the important thing is to have, you know, a family, a home, like something to eat. And it was like the basics that a man should have to be happy. And then we have another Jerzy Stur in Camera Buff, in Amateur.
Exactly, yes.
He says, I mean, it's not enough. I want something more. And then you can see this history.
Yeah, that's very nice connection, because he wants something more, like Robban in this film. He wants to be a pop singer, you know, he wants something more. And you have that also in the Calm. He wants to work there in the theater, you know. But you have, that's interesting, yes.
So we have one director, but we have to mention, I mean, and to get the part about Bergman, because I mean, Kieślowski was very open about it, and also many specialists, even with, you know, Polish filmoznawstwo, film studies, are analyzing these verticals, you know, elements of both their style and also thematics that they use, this connection or disconnection maybe with some upper power we've got. So what can you tell me from your perspective of a really specialist of Sweden cinema and of Kieślowski, what points here can be what dots can we connect in the aspect of both their work?
Yes, yes. It's a very interesting questions. Let us say, to begin, Kieślowski's connection with Bergman is very complex. As you said before, when you were talking about Fellini, La Strada, he says actually in the interview with Danusia Stock that he says the following. This is very interesting, I think. I remember watching Fellini's La Strada and not being disillusioned at all. I liked it just as much as before, if not more. And then I watched the film by Bergman called Sovdust and Tinsel, Gycklarnas afton in Swedish, from 1953. And I remember I had a beautiful recollections of that film. But I find myself watching something on the screen which left me completely indifferent, which was completely alien to me. And I couldn't understand what I'd seen it before, apart from perhaps 3 or 4 scenes. I didn't experience anything of the tension which I felt when I watched it before. So, and then he says that there are some other movies that he feel this tension, and Bergman is fantastic. But I think he has a point here, because this film, he says, aged this film, Sovdust and Tinsel, but other movies didn't age. And why? And I think one reason is that in Bergman, I think he have a friend that also depicts this existential human reality, like himself, this existential truth. And Kieślowski must feel that in the movie. Otherwise, he cannot feel that, he doesn't have that tension. And one thing that is very interesting, and I'm sure that it's not so many people that know this. For instance, Kieślowski wrote a very deep article about a film that Kieślowski made. And that film is also from 1963. And that film is called The Själens. And this film is one of the strongest and the most important films that Bergman ever did. And I have myself, actually, this is very interesting, I must say, I have written a long text about this film, The Själens, in an English anthology that will come now with psychoanalytical perspectives on Ingmar Bergman. And Kieślowski himself, this article is fantastic, you know. Kieślowski, he's so sharp, you know. It's 3 pages, and on these 3 pages, he says everything about Bergman, you know. He's very, very sharp, and, you know, it's a very rich text. And he says that this film, The Själens, is a riddle. And the Swedish film genius himself as being at loss for answering all the questions that the movie itself raises, because Bergman cannot answer them at all himself. So why and how does the silence appear before and in this film, The Själens? What does this stillness refer into this case, according to Kieślowski? Kieślowski says the following. The silence in Bergman is as painful as death in Fellini, as absence in Buñuel and Tarkovsky, as the beautiful but no longer moving films of Kurosawa or the failures of Vaida. That it's fantastic. And this film, I can tell you something about this film in some short meanings. It's about 2 sisters. One sister is called Anna, the other is Esther. And Anna have an 11-year-old son, Johan. And they're on their way home by a train through an unnamed country. We don't know which country it is. But Esther is ill. She has this sickness. They don't know what kind of sickness. So they are forced to cancel the trip and take in to a desolate turn of the century hotel in this country. And the country whose language they don't understand seems close to the outbreak of war. So you can, when they pass in the way into the city, they see a long line of tanks, you know. So you have this feeling that they are in East Europe and it's the tanks. You have that feeling, but we don't know. But the contactlessness between the sisters is total. It's so much hate, you know, between them, but also love. And Kieślowski, he can see that, you know, he's writing a lot about the contactlessness between the sisters. And there, Esther, she's very intellectual, cerebral, but contrasted with Anna, who is much more fleshy, you know, has more desire in her body. So while Esther lies alone and sick in her room, she's seeking solace in alcohol and cigarettes. Anna, she's discovering the city, you know. And after witnessing a copulating couple at this show, she begins a sexual relationship with the waiter. And Esther jealously watches over her and is driven to despair by her lived desires. That's the film, you know. So, you know, I must say something about the response of the film, because, you know, this film people were totally upset, you know, but it was a success because it's really avoided Swedish censorship, but it caused a debate right up to the level of the government. And Bergman was considered to break the sex barrier on the film, you know. And it was a producer in Argentina. He was a distributor of the film. He was sentenced 1 year to prison to produce the film because the love scenes in the films, and it was too much, you know. And this film actually is the third one of 3 films about God's silence. And only when you said God's silence, you can think about Kieślowski, you know. You had that here. So the 2 films before is Through a Glass Darkly and Winter Light. There are 2 films, and then the silence comes. So in this film, you have the theme of alienation between people, like in Kieślowski's film, the child's view on the world, and this devastating sexuality, this wordlessness, and Sven Nykvist's photo. So I think if I would say something about why Kieślowski wrote this article and why he appreciated Bergman, I think you can understand something about that when you see this film. First of all, the film is born between 2 opposite poles that Bergman called stillness and violent movement. And you have this stillness, this quiet silence. You can feel that in Kieślowski's movies in some way. You always have this silence because there aren't so many words in Kieślowski's films, like in this film, because Kieślowski is always elaborating with silence in some way. That's why his film also enigmatic, you know, and mysterious, because you have to understand, because there are not so many words in some, and that you can definitely feel in this film. And this quiet silence is painful and sorrowful, and as Kieślowski says, the following: you have this fundamentally tangible and discernible atmosphere that made this film narrative different from all others at that time, and explained why so many people in so many countries all over the world wanted to see this film. And that's why. So it was to witnessing a dissolving world in this film. And you can feel that in some of Kieślowski's film, especially the 5th of the Decalogue, you know, the world is dissolving, you know, it's going down, it's sinking, and everything is collapsing, and the ground gives way under our feet. You know, the images, the symbols, and the mirrors have been dissolved, and an impalpable abyss is revealed. And you see that in this film. And I can feel that in Kieślowski's film also. There is an unbearable gulf, and you have these struggles for life and death that can be acted out in violence, that you also can meet in Kieślowski's film. And as Kieślowski says, when he's talking about the film's style, he said the following: Bergman has constructed the silence simply. Everything superfluous is removed. There is no establishing shot, no shots aimed at locating the plot. And that's Kieślowski. I think he has a friend here in Bergman, his way of filming. And all this, both the mood and the form, were recognized in Kieślowski's own film, I think. This tragic and execrable truth of death make visible and embodies our existential conditions and fate. And to say the last words that Kieślowski says about Bergman, and this is very important, because he says something about himself when he says it. Bergman has, almost like no one else, perhaps he's the only one in the world, has much to say about human nature as Dostoevsky and Camus. And Dostoevsky and Camus, that is Kieślowski, especially Camus. And all this concerns Kieślowski's film, especially, I think, the Decalogue. And it's important to notice, maybe you did know that, Diana, know this, that Bergman himself regarded the Decalogue as one of the 5 film works of his time that he was most impressed by. And that's interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting, because normally there's a lot said about Stanley Kubrick's opinion about this.
Yes.
But about Bergman, I was wondering, if there was a mutual recognition. It was also from Bergman to Kieślowski,
Yeah.
Any meetings, letters, or something. Do we know more about it?
I have really tried to get some letters or something, but it's nothing. I will try to, there is in Sweden, Bergman, he was living at Gotland, Fårö, and he has it's an archive there. And I will try to do some research there. But before, no, I don't think we know anything. But maybe there are some letters. But we know for sure that Bergman saw Decalogue, and he appreciated. He saw that it was one of the 5 most works that he was most impressed by. And I think Kieślowski, he also wanders between hope and doubt, and has established a metaphysically cross-border film language like Bergman. There is a correspondence between them, and especially the way of belief in religious images or in God. I think there is a connection there also between some.
From the Polish perspective, is mentioned many times that Bergman liked one of Wajda's movies, and there's this famous top 11, not top 10, but top 11 with Dirigent from 1979.
Exactly.
And it's less, we should know more, I think, about this Decalogue connection between Kieślowski and Bergman. And thank you really much for saying about it, because we really don't know. Normally it's more about this, recognition for the scripts of the Decalogue.
Yeah.
And it said a lot about it, and also Krzysztof Kieślowski, as you know, like someone that can again tell you about it a lot, because he was writing it with Kieślowski. Mentioned a lot about this recognition by Kubrick, which was
this is very interesting, Diana, because yesterday I saw a fantastic documentary about Kubrick, and I remember that he's written about in the foreword about the manuscript. And he's fantastic, he says everything in these few words about the manuscript and the Decalogue. And so I think Kubrick is also a very important director to have in mind when you're trying to understand the Decalogue. And I must say, I think we can have a deeper understanding of the Decalogue if we have in mind Bergman and Kubrick, of course, and some other.
Okay, so let's enter in the world of the Decalogue. You remember your first, time with the Decalogue, how you were watching it? It was like part by part, or you had, you started, I don't know, with the 5th, for example, episode, and then went to, like, how did you watch it? It was linear or?
That's a very nice question. Very nice question. Because I remember it actually as it was today. because it was with my friend Jim Volgen, and we saw, because they were showing it retrospectively in the Gothenburg Film Festival. So we saw one film every day. So we saw first one, second, third, fourth, fifth, and but still today I have two favorites, especially. You know, I have been talking a lot about the Decalogue in different kind of context, and you know, when we are showing the Decalogue 5 people, there is so much anxiety in the room, you know, and especially also the first one, they are crying, you know, when they see it. But I must say, before, I think it's very interesting to note the following about the Decalogue, because here in Sweden, actually, there is, you know, Kieślowski is relatively unknown here in Sweden, but a lot of text and articles have been published that meaningfully address Kieślowski's film art and films. There are in Swedish film magazines several texts about Kieślowski appear. There are remarkably many articles, reviews, and a lot of interviews with Kieślowski that no one knows, but because they are in Swedish, and they are very important. I must say that. But the reason why I talk about this is the following. Earlier this spring, Gothenburg City Theatre, they intended to stage Kieślowski's Decalogue in a theatrical form, you know, in the theater here in Gothenburg. But the project has to be postponed because due to the pandemic, you know, it's very sad, you know, because it was a huge project. It was, I think, 15 actors, you know, it was 2 directors, producer, you know, and now they have to postpone all projects. And actually, I was a mentor for that project. So I met all the actors and I was talking with the directors, and I wrote a huge article in a newspaper here in Sweden about the project. And it was fantastic interesting, you know, to make theater of the Decalogue. And so actually, this Decalogue in this theater form, you can say, was transformed into theater earlier on the continent. And the current staging is based on the adaptation performed by a person called John von Düffel and Stephanie Karp and director Karin Henkel at the Schauspielhaus in Zurich. And that was in the autumn of 2015. So already done, the Decalogue was theater. And the directors here, the name is Birgit Niederhaus and Ragnar Wey. They explain the following about the project here. They say, on what values and prohibitions is our society based? In what contradictions and ethical choices can man end up when he follows or doesn't follow them? Kieślowski's film epic is well reflected in our time. That's the reason. And that's very interesting to look at the Decalogue. So, to say something about 2 films in the Decalogue, I think that has that for me is something special. The first film is more emotionally, more personal for me. I'm very touched by the first film, the Decalogue one. You know, it's the death of a child. You know, it's extremely strong film, and the father has lost his son for not daring to listen to his own intuition in his parenthood. You know, he's not listening to himself, but he's more listening to the technology or to the computer, and that takes the place of an almighty creator, or the technology take God's place. There is one reason. It's so incredible sharp thinking of Kieślowski to do that, you know, for the Decalogue one. And then this film is in the series where Kieślowski gives the metaphysical and the mysterious dimension a prominent place just in this first film, more than in the other, I think. I don't know if you remember, the moment we never know in the movie when the ice breaks and the Pavel, we don't know why and when exactly. And at the moment when Pavel drowns on a cloudy and rainy afternoon, Christoph is sitting in the apartment and his desk, he's working. And the roar of a plane is flowing over the residential area and it penetrates the window. It's a plane that flies. And suddenly he sees how a dark blue spot spreads through the notes on the table, and this moment, And after a while, he realizes that the ink bottle has cracked and that the ink has run out. And exactly the same time when you can feel that Pavel is going through the eyes, So you have in some mystical form, when the ink bottle is cracks, it's when the ice is cracks. And I think that type of corresponding is Kieślowski. He's fantastic, to do that. Because these kind of things can happen, It's metaphysical. So it's not, try to show in some symbolic meaning, some religious, metaphysical, mysterious truth. It's not like that. Kieślowski only tried to say, things can happen, We don't know. And that's one point, I think, in Kieślowski's filmmaking that is very important, because he says in an interview that I'm not a mystical filmmaker, not at all. But I try to show that there are some metaphysical cracks in our existence that we not always can symbolize, that we don't understand. And I think that's important. And in that film, you can see that very, very. And of course, you can see that also in the film trilogy, and especially in the double life of Veronique, of course. And the other film, intellectually, more not so emotionally, is the short film about killing. And that film is expanded from Decalogue 5, but the film is longer, so you have more time to know the character in the film, comparing to the short films in the Decalogue. But myself, why I think this film is so very, very strong and important is that Kieślowski, he's basically depicting a very, very cruel world, this cruel world that we're living in, but we don't want to see. And that is, he's showing. You're remembering the opening scene at the backyard. Some young people have hung up a strangled shabby cat in a carpet. And they stand, and next to an empty pack of cigarettes lies a dead skinny rat in the dirty water. And the cat has been killed by the young people who run from there. And the scene with the garbage and the lifeless animal bodies evokes the image of the social body rotting. And that's a Kieślowski way of looking at our society. You can almost say the society is dissolving. And you also have this master photographer, Slavomir Ichiak, and he has this brown-green camera filter in the film where distorted picture frames blur all life and all context, So you have this special atmosphere in all the movie. And Kieślowski's own words, this is a black poetic game documentary, has placed us in an empty, dirty, and gloomy capital where the human code and unhappiness seems to have spread forever in some way. And the people in the film, compared to the other, they are very dark in mind, they're hostile, they're anonymous and lonely. And with the horrific acts in the film, the virtue of the murder and the execution. And this with this film, Kieślowski was totally against death penalty, and was one of the reasons that he made that film, actually. And he portrays in raw and rough images a society that lacks warmth, community, and meaning. And Kieślowski wants that to be in society, but he shows the real society, how it is, not only there in Poland, but in the whole Europe and the world. I think there is extremely important to notice that, because you can feel that also in some way in the red film. You have this, the world is going down in some way. You know, you have the huge boat in the end of the red film is going down, and in some way it's the collapse of the world in the same way also. And you can feel that in this film, in the fifth film. So that's the reason these two films that I think is very strong for me.
I was also thinking and wondering about one aspect of Kieślowski's work, because he's like entering from documentary to this new field, you know, for himself in the 70s. And you know, when you see movies like Scarf or even Spokój, I mean, there are these paradocumental styling, and you can feel that there is this connection with reality. But then, okay, the emotion are real, but if you see the settings, the lighting, the props, the colors, you know, it's very, you know, everything is so perfect in Kieślowski's movies, like after, you know, and during the French era. So I was thinking, you know, how do you see this change in Kieślowski's work? And also if we can say it's a change, because there are some elements that stay still, one could say, because this observation of the human nature is still there, but the decoration are different. So I was also speaking with Annette Insdorf, which, you know, is a really, I mean, big friend of him, and she was a translator of him. She wrote many, you know, articles and books about him. And for example, she was analyzing, you know, the liquids in the Decalogue. It was very interesting, you know, how Pavel can, with his aunt, he's showing her that from the computer perspective, he can, you know, stop water and make water again moving. And this is, I mean, amazing when you, but in the end, the reality, this combination. So I was thinking, if you, from your perspective, you know, this game that Kieślowski has with decoration, lighting, props, to create this world, you know, that everything has a double meaning, almost, we would say, and can be used in an interpretation, you know, in red, in blue. And from your perspective, you know, as an interpretation of this world, what you can tell me more about it?
Yes, I think there are some connections. I'm writing also a book about an Italian painter. His name is Caravaggio. Do you know Caravaggio? Caravaggio for me is like Kieślowski, you know? Caravaggio, as they say in Italy. And Caravaggio, you can always see when he's...
You know what is the funny thing, you know? And this is like Kieślowski blind chance. I'm half Italian, you know, like...
Okay. Fantastic.
Chiaroscuro Caravaggio is really, you know...
Yes. Yeah, that. There you see the connection.
I mean, it's Kieślowski. Kieślowski is working. In the end,
Chiaroscuro, that's Kieślowski. Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah.
Please tell me about Caravaggio.
Yeah, you know, this is Caravaggio. You see the painting, yes. And why I mentioned Caravaggio is that he was at different places, but still you can see that it's a Caravaggio painting. But the room is changing, you know. He had to use different kind of perspectives and colors, because he is not at the same room. He changed places. And that's the same with Kieślowski, you know. In some way, I think you can make a distinction between forms and content, you know. The forms is changing. So when Kieślowski are making the movies in the West, in Paris or in Geneva, the forms are different, you know. There are different colors, there are different style, different kind of methods, but the content, it always is the same. I think the content from Kieślowski's first film, when he's doing this short movie about the young boy and girl, they are going on the pram. You remember the first film? Yes. The content.
Tram.
Yes, the tram. Yes. The content, his way of looking at the world, is the same totally through all the films, I think. But the forms in the way he is doing that and his way of elaborating it, and he did experience and his way of looking at that. But the way of looking at the world is the same. So I think you have still the same way of talking about these existential questions that he does that in the foreign movies, but you can see the same thing in the Polish films or in documentary. But again, the style and the content are different. That one aspect. Another aspect that I think that there are too little discussion about when it comes to Kieślowski, and that is when Kieślowski are in Paris, he is in exile. And that's a very, I'm working as a psychoanalyst. I meet patients from everywhere in the world. And when they come to different culture, they are in exile. And Kieślowski, he were in France. He didn't learn to speak French, and he was going back to Poland. It was his home, like he said. But he was in exile. And what happened with Kieślowski when he does make film in exile, And this is a very interesting question. For instance, if you know Dante, Divine Commedia, he made that book when he was in exile. But he didn't have make that book if he wasn't in exile. So we must also understand when Kieślowski is in exile in France, he has this extremely, I think, loneliness. He wants to come back to Poland. And all these things are also in the films, You can see that, for instance, especially in the White film, you can see that. Very, very special. And you can also feel that in La Double Vie de Véronique also, in some way. And I think that's also a very interesting point. What does this exile experience, does it do with Kieślowski in the films? That one thing, I'm writing about that in my book. I think that's also a very important point. Because if he didn't go to Paris, what kind of movies would he have done if he had stayed in Poland? That's very interesting, Also, we never know, but...
Wow, I could really listen you for hours. I mean, we have now an Italian also part of the Polish one with Kieślowski. So the last question I want to ask you is connected to, or maybe you want to add something, please be free to do it. It's about this, game that Kieślowski has with everything that is doubled, like the view of Veronique is one thing, and it's a very, primer example. But again, even in the Decalogue, there are like a whole universe in there that you can see, some stories that are each other's. So, did you analyze it in a way, maybe, because it's really amazing that after the meeting with Pisiewicz, after No End, and also we can say that No End, it's also a movie with a color, with the black color. And when you analyze all the frame, like the color in a very important, has a meaning there. But then with the Decalogue, it's like we are all connected. And then, it's really amazing when you compare, for example, like the French films of Kieślowski, and From Blue with Binoche, and then you go 10 years after and you see a movie from Haneke, and you can see, how Europe is collapsing. And I think it's very interesting you said that we can feel something is cracking, and we sink, like the boat you mentioned. So can we elaborate on that? And if we can, if you have time, of course.
You mean with when he does it with the double,
Yes.
With it's incredibly interesting because I think it has a deep meaning for Kieślowski to do that. It's not only a question about to elaborate with, I mean, an intellectual way of thing, because I think Kieślowski wants to say something about that. And I think, for instance, with this double, I think he, in some way, showing how he thinks about our identity. In the way when I'm looking in the mirror, I can see myself, and that's a way of looking how our identity is constructed. And that's, I think, Kieślowski's way of looking at ourselves and our subjects, for instance. I'm not sure if you know, I have been a lot of times in France because I'm in the tradition of a French psychoanalyst called Jacques Lacan. And he has this mirror stage, you know.
And there are a lot of mirrors in Kieślowski also.
Exactly. And I think that's an important thing, because then he can see, he can depict people in very special way, because he's using these mirrors and the double, of course. That's one point. Another point is, I think, for Kieślowski, it's always a barrier between people. You cannot, it's always some filter that are between us. And I think that has a symbolic meaning between when he's using these doubles or these mirrors, I think. And the third point, I think, that is very, very, and this is some way enigmatic, when you're, as you say, for instance, especially in the Decalogue and a lot of other movies, when you see a person in the mirror, you see something else always. But you cannot see that when you confronted the person directly. And Kieślowski is incredible in that way. You know, he's amazing. So that's my thoughts about that.
I mean, Peter, thank you.
Thank you very much, Diana. Thank you very much.